Good evening, folks, and welcome to Frankishly Speaking. I'm Barry R. Frankish, and this is episode number 2. First of all, I would like to say thank you to my last guest, Mr. Richard Case. Brilliant guest for my very first show. A fantastic guy, all respect. And once again, Richard, thank you very much. Now, tonight is no exception. We have got a brilliant guest, and what can I say about this guy? He's actually he's a freelance writer. He's a researcher, author. He has worked on various multimedia projects on TV, film, and radio, as well as newspapers, until the bottom of the list, my little show. How honoured am I? Now, I would like to introduce to you author and historian, Mr. Mike Covell. Evening, Mike.
Evening.
Good evening. Thank you. Welcome to my show. We are there. Now,
Thanks
Mike, once again, welcome to the show, Mike. Now, could you give us a brief insight into who you are and why you decided to take the path you actually took?
When I was 8 years old, I saw a UFO, or what I thought was a UFO overall. I asked my father what it could be, and he gave me a big book of a Partworks magazine called The Unexplained. I don't know if you remember it in the sort of the 70s.
I do remember that.
And he handed me that. And he said, have a read. And I read it from cover to cover, and then got the next volume off him, and then the next volume. And then that was stuff about Jack the Ripper and UFOs and ghosts and sea monsters. So that was kind of the seeds, really, of my interest. And every year I used to say to me at Christmas, what do you want for Christmas? I'd say, oh, can I have, the latest book by this author, or the latest, video by this guy, and I'd ask for stuff to do with the paranormal. So some of it was ghostly, some of it was UFOs, and I just started collecting. And he used to get me all the magazines. We used to cut out all newspaper clippings, and we used to keep them in little folders and stuff by category. And he used to get me all the books and stuff. And then I basically got into full-time employment, and I kind of stopped. I concentrated on family life and stuff like that. Then around about 15 years ago, I was diagnosed with a critical heart condition. I was told I couldn't work. I had to give up a full-time job. And in the meantime, what I did was I would go to the local studies library and just raid the place, get as many books as I could, sit in there and read the old newspapers and stuff like that. And at that point, then I thought, you know what? I want to write a book. I want to put all this knowledge together and write a book. I didn't know where to start. Up until that point, I'd only written sort of fictional stuff at school. And I'd written like love stories and stuff like that. I didn't want to do anything to do with that. I wanted to kind of write about ghosts and the dark history. And at the time, my dad sort of said to me, why don't you write a book about ghosts in Hull? So that was the first idea. The second idea was to write a book about Jack the Ripper's connections to Hull. So those two ideas was what set me on the path, really. And here we are today, 15 years later. I've published 30. I've finished 51 books. I've written for various magazines and newspapers, and of course appeared on TV shows like Most Haunted Live, Paranormal Lockdown, as well as history shows like World War II Treasure Hunters and things like that. So it's been a crazy roller coaster ride.
Now, I'm intrigued because you mentioned magazines previously. Now, I was a fan of collecting magazines, but as we all know, paranormal magazines don't seem to last that long, do they? Now, yes, I remember actually the Unexplained magazine. I also remember Uri Geller's Encounters as well. I used to collect as well. You got 40 Times as well. I mean, why do you believe we seem to follow a trend and just seem to disappear? Is there a reason behind that? Because we're paranormal. It's always going to be here.
Yeah, I think it goes with trends. I remember in the 90s, all the UFO mag was massively popular. Then when Most Haunted came out, everything seemed to be ghostly. And I think it goes with trends of what's popular at the time. When stuff seems to die down, the magazine seems to die out as well. I mean, I've been collecting 40 Times now for, it must be getting on for 25, maybe 30 years. I've been collecting 40 Times. But I went through all this. I had Sightings magazine, Encounters magazine, there was X Factor magazine. UFO magazine was one of my favorites. That was short-lived. The Unopened Files. And we collected all them from the beginning up until when they stopped. and would send off for the binders. And I've got them all in box files behind me.
I do remember binders, yeah, but I remember binder collections, yeah. That is amazing. That, but like I said, I mean, 14 times it does seem to be one of those names. Or it does seem to. It's as anonymous as Ghost Album themselves. It does seem to be with us. Not. I mean, even though it does seem further. It does seem more difficult to get hold of these days. Not every news agent or supermarket is accessible on their shelf, do they? I mean, they do seem to favour a more reality TV type style these days, don't they?
Yeah, it is kind of a much sought after. I know there's maybe 2 or 3 stockists in all. The rest, the big supermarkets tend not to stock it. I mean, the thing I like about 14 times, it covers kind of everything. So you've got cryptozoology, you've got ufology, you've got ghostly stuff in there. You've got like the old, Aztecs and pyramids and all this kind of stuff. It's kind of everything's in there together. There's usually a page on conspiracy theories, and so everything's represented really in that kind of magazine, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's so popular. It tends not to get pigeonholed like a lot of the others.
Yeah, and then your offshoots with TV programs like you had, for example, Strange But True. You had 14 TV as well with Father Lionel Fanthorpe, which I thought that was brilliant. An actual priest investigating the paranormal. I mean, I thought that was unheard of at the time, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, and I mean, what set that show apart is at the end of every show, he'd sing a little song about what was in the episode beforehand. We recorded all them on VHS. We've got a tape somewhere with all them episodes on. But yeah, again, there's been so many weird and wonderful paranormal shows and things like that over the years.
There is, isn't there? I mean, it does seem, it was an age of the paranormal at the time. It's you didn't get the TV programs are few and far between, but they were well created, well made, weren't they?
Oh yeah, there was some fantastic productions back then. I remember in sort of like the mid to late 90s, there was hundreds and hundreds of VHS videos coming out that had fantastic. They were really well put together. They were presented well. I remember at one point UFO magazine did a series of DVDs, and it was quite unheard of to have a paranormal DVD, and it was just footage of UFO sightings and stuff like that. And again, it was fascinating. It was really interesting to watch.
Yeah, and this is days before digital cameras. So this was the actual what capture was on actual physical negatives as well. So if it was caught in camera, it was also caught in negative, which gave it more credibility. Now we know you're all based, Mike. You're an historian who specialises in the darker side of history. Now, and Hull is no exception, especially with its wartime history and the Luftwaffe bombings. Now, what can you tell us of Hull that the tourist board don't want us to know?
Oh God, it's got such a dark history. Yeah, I mean, if you look at the sort of history of Hull, if you come into the tourist board, they talk about people like Philip Larkin and Amy Johnson, William Wilberforce, and they talk about the big names. There's a lot of other names they don't really talk about, and it's those kind of names that add real character to the city. I mean, this was a city that went through kind of the plague, it went for the cholera. It was flooded on several occasions. It was hit during World War I in the Zeppelin raids. It was bombed during World War II by the Luftwaffe. And it seems to get hit and hit and hit and just keeps bouncing back every time. And there's so many stories. I can take you on a tour of Hull and show you where mass casualty events happened, and there's nothing there. There's no plaques. There's no memorials. And even on my World War II tour, when you're walking around, you finish at the civilian memorial. And I've taken councillors on that tour, and they're shocked when I show them this memorial. I say, if you look down, you'll see the memorial, and you can hear the gasps, and people are just shocked, and they sort of say, why is this not talked about more often? Well, it is, but you're just not listening, and that's the problem, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think history, like I said, you're an historian yourself. I mean, without history, we would not be here. So I believe it's one of those stories what must be told over and over again, so people don't forget what people went through before us. Now, I mean, myself, I'm from Featherstone, West Yorkshire originally, in that little mining town. And the other day, I actually visited the new Warhorse plaque. Well, it's not really a plaque, it's a big, massive metal horse. It's a beautiful creature, actually, to commemorate the 353 First World War soldiers from Featherstone who actually gave their lives fighting for our freedom. and it's a beautiful. I mean, it's on my BRF Paranormal page on my personal group, my personal page at the moment. If you look at the pictures of it, it's a beautiful epitaph to people who came before us. I mean, what better way to respect those people? I mean, it does seem history these days. It's been we are selective in what we tell.
Yeah, definitely, and it seems like you've got to really, really, really look for it. You know, you've got to know where it is. One of the things I show people is on the City Hall in Hull, which is one of the big central buildings. Thousands of people must pass by that every day. There's bullet holes in it, but you've got to know where to look. And there's nothing at ground level to indicate that there's World War II bullet holes up. You've got to stand there on a sunny day and kind of look up and realise what you're looking at. But yet again, when you show people, they're shocked. You know, they don't realise it's there.
It's like Doncaster, where I live now. It's opposite the train station. There's a few streets, and one of these streets is a tattooist now. And that street actually got bombed during World War II when Luftwaffe actually bombed Sheffield and came over Doncaster to lighten the load. And a few Doncaster got leveled in a few places. And it's nowadays amongst the other modern buildings, there's some beautiful old buildings as well. I mean, people forget. I mean, you've got history out under his noses. And because you see it every day, you're becoming people can become kind of blind to it, don't they?
Yeah, that's it. We pass by this stuff every day. We have a lovely old street in Hull called Whitefrigate. It's kind of the main street, and it's one of the original sort of market streets in the city. And again, thousands of people pass down it every day. You see all the shop fronts, you know, all the regular traders, all the big companies that you'd see on any high street. But when you stop and look up at the first floor and the second floor, you see architecture from sort of the 1700s, the 1800s, the 1900s. There's a lovely Art Deco building down there. And it's all on display. It's just that people don't stop to appreciate it. We're too busy.
Yeah.
You know, you get a lot of people on the phones and looking at the floor, and they're missing out on this wonderful architecture and all this.
Exactly. I mean, that's it. I mean, Doncaster itself, no exception. Between the Frenchgate Shopping Centre and the supermarket, there's a lovely old theatre. This theatre is basically left to ruin now, but it's still got its fixings and fixtures, and it's a beautiful listed old building. But no one because it's where it is. No one seems to want to touch it. It's a shame. No, we've got a few guests.
There's a lot of stuff like that in Hull. There's a lot of there's a lot of kind of gorgeous buildings that have just been left, really, and it's a real shame. In the past few years, we've seen Victorian music halls getting bulldozed and churches and stuff, and it's just, you know, a lot of what I do is I fight for the heritage of the city. So in the past, I've fought for historical buildings. I fought for Beverley Gate to stay open. I fought for the Hands-on History Museum to remain open, and I kind of fight for the history because I want it to be there for my kids when they grow up as well. You know, and I want it to be there for their kids in the future. So I do get on people's nerves a lot, fighting for this sort of stuff.
I agree with you totally, because it does seem a bit senseless waste, really, making new buildings when there's all these old buildings still to ruin. I mean, you can understand the asbestos side of things, but you can get around that. I mean, legally, obviously. I mean, why not reutilize these old buildings? I mean, it does seem a shame. Now, Nicky's.
Yeah, there's loads of beautiful buildings, loads of Victorian mills and.
Yeah, definitely. Now, David West, Lorraine Jones, hi guys. Nicky, hi. If you got a question like to ask Mike, feel free to pop it on. Now, Mike, it seems we're a bit juddery at the moment, but now you've appeared on local national TV. You've been featured in countless worldwide radio shows, as well as being an advisor to websites. And you're also known for your numerous publications. I mean, so I've got a list of them, of a few down here. You've got the Ghost Files, more Ghost Files, Haunted Inns and more Haunted Inns, Haunted East Yorkshire, the UFO Files, the Umber Monster, the Paranormal Archives, is it? Yeah. That's just a fraction of your publications. I mean, one title, though, does stand out from all that lot. Everything seems to be ghostly and spiritual regarding the UFO Files. Now, is Hull a UFO hotspot?
It has been, yeah. In the past, in 1967, we had a big flap over the city. In 1992, there was another big flap. In 1801 was the very, very famous UFO sighting where a big blue ball of light dropped over the Humber and split into four, then rejoined again and flew off. And that was really interesting. Just before the First World War, there was a number of scare ship sightings. So there has been quite a lot of UFO sightings in the region.
That's fascinating. That is it because you think it's such an industrial city? You think there's some interest
so, yeah. There? A lot of the sightings are kind of over the Humber as well. So I think that large body of water, and especially on a night when there's no lights over the Humber, so it's pitch black. So you're just looking into this inky blackness. And people do tend to report a lot of stuff over there.
Yeah. Now, another one I'm interested in. We mentioned your home city of Hull quite a bit. Now, it's to be understandable. Now, it's not just a fact; it's steeped in history regarding the war, for example. But there's a publication, or should I say, publications suggest that Hull may have a connection to the Jack the Ripper and the Whitechapel murders of 1988. Could you clarify this, please? What connection is there to link London with Hull?
Yeah, so basically at the time, Hull and London were two major ports. They were linked by the ferries. They were linked by the railway. There was a number of Ripper letters sent to Hull. There was Ripper letters sent from Hull. And there was also Ripper letters that were sent mentioning Hull. And then on top of that, there were 14 suspects with links to the city. So one of them was born here. Some of them stayed here. Some of them visited here. Some of them worked here. And then after that, there was a lot of what we would term Jack the Ripper scares, where people were getting assaulted by members of the public carrying knives and things like that. So yeah, there was quite a few connections, enough to write a lot of books on. We also had our own correspondents from the Hull Daily Mail in London at the time. So they were passing on information back to Hull for them to publish.
That's fascinating. And now Lorraine Jones is put forward. And Mike, I know about murder in your house, but is it haunted? What's this about a murder in your house? What have you been up to?
So we moved into our property in, I think it was 2010. Within the space of being in here for a few weeks, my eldest turned around and said there's a man at the end of the bed near the door, and he's got a bit of wood in his hand. And he's banging it into his hand. And there's my daughter kept saying there's a little old lady that sings to us on a night and tucks us in bed and stuff like that. So I went to the History Centre and started researching it. And one of the things I went through was called the Hull Times Index. And it had a newspaper report saying murder on 7th Street, which is where I live. So I just printed it off to read, really. I thought this would be nice to show the neighbours and things like that. And it was when I was reading the article, I realised it was in our house. It actually had the address in the newspaper article. So I went back into the archive, printed off about 30 different newspaper reports. And the basic gist of the story, on April 1st, 1945, Fred Watson, who was a fitter, he was a lodger, came home from work. He grabbed an axe and he put it through Mrs. Garbutt's head. She was in the room that's just behind. And he put it through her head 6 times. He then dragged her body into this room where I'm sitting right now. He turned on the gas taps because this was the old scullery, and that failed to catch them. So he took a rusty knife, tried to cut his wrist. By that point, the police had knocked the door down and he was arrested. He was taken to a hospital in the city centre. He escaped from the hospital and they rearrested him. They patched up his wrists. They took him to court. In court, he was declared insane. They sent him to an asylum, and when he got to the asylum, he killed himself. So we had the murder in the property and the suicide connected with him. And I thought, what about the husband? Where's Mr. Garbutt? Why is Mrs. Garbutt on her own? So I went even further back in time. In 1929, he left the property and was never seen alive again. They pulled him out the Humber near Grimsby, and it looked like he'd been beaten up and thrown in the Humber. So we called the Diocese of York. They sent a priest round, and he came into the house and did a blessing. It was really funny. He came in the door. He said, "Don't tell me anything about your house." He said, "There's a man at the top of the stairs," and he said, "He doesn't like you or your family. He's not a very nice man. What do you want me to do with him?" So I, quite ashamedly, in front of the priest, I used very colourful language and basically said he can leave. And the priest said, "Don't worry, we'll start now." And then he said, "Mrs. Garbutt," he said, "she really likes you and your family. She thinks it's a nice family home. She wants to stay. So if she's happy, she can stay." So we do get stuff going on. It's nothing like in the films, anything like that. It's usually daft things like you might get the odd smell of violets or things like that. Occasionally you'll hear a lady singing or humming, but she always sounds really happy. and we'll just see the odd thing out the corner of the eye, and the house has a nightmare for stuff going missing and reappearing elsewhere and stuff like that. So yeah, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's scary. I wouldn't say it's scary, and the children are really happy in here, so that they enjoy it.
What do your neighbours and friends think about the house then, regarding knowing its history? I mean, do they think it's a bit macabre you're living in an house where such a deed's happened, or?
You know, the funny thing is, I was born on this street, so I've lived on this street all my life. I never knew the story. After we moved into the property and I did all the research and we had the priest come down, one of the neighbours turned around and said, "Oh yeah, we knew about it being haunted." Like, nobody had mentioned it, you know, before us moving in. And one of the old residents who lived there, she contacted us and said, "We remember living there and we had loads of stuff going on and we called the church and all sorts of stuff." Nobody had ever mentioned it beforehand. But when we was able to tell them the story and said, "This is what actually happened," they found it fascinating. And, you know, people come round and stuff, and usually anyway, I'm in the car at the minute because of COVID, but usually we have friends and family around and stuff, and no one's ever really seemed bothered by it. So
yeah. Do you get people walking past the house, pointing, "That's the house, that's the house"?
So sometimes, yeah, we've had people come round and like if we're sat in the front garden on a summer's evening, they'll come and chat and stuff. But yeah, it's an interesting place. I've written about it. It's in one of my books, so people know the story. But yeah, it is an interesting place, and these are all Victorian properties. This property, this street, was built on a site where Buffalo Bill performed in 1888. It was an old rugby and a football pitch. So there's a lot of history in this area.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned obviously knowing the whereabouts of the deeds, what's happened to your property. Now in Doncaster, I've found this myself. There's a huge graveyard, and on one particular headstone, it tells you the deceased name, and it also tells you the address they lived in. Now, I have looked at this, and the address is still there, and it's now a block of flats. I mean, does that happen in Hull as well? Is there a reason why we put the addresses on where people have passed away?
No, that's quite unusual. That, yeah, it is a strange one to have their address on. Usually, it'll just be, you know, names of the family members, and there'll be a verse and stuff like that, or the date of death. And I've not heard of an address on one before. That is quite odd.
Yeah, well, what I'll do is when I find it again in my file somewhere else, I'll ping it across to you, see what you think to it, because it's actually there now. I mean, obviously, I'm behaving myself. I'm at work. I do my work, and I'm behaving myself regarding COVID restrictions. I've had my first jab, and I'm just waiting for my next one, and we can carry on as normal. But it does. When I noticed it, I walked past it. There's a gravestone in that with my family name on it as well. But I don't know if it's related to my direct family, because I'm not originally from Doncaster. My grandparents came from York. I mean, there's a possibility. Maybe I'm off to Doncaster, and my family name is also in Doncaster timeline for some reason, which I'm in difficulty finding why it's on the Doncaster timeline. It's nice what it is, but I mean, it seems a bit strange. I've noticed the Doncaster pavement. There's a particular part of the pavement where the timeline runs down the street, and it's got my surname on it, my family name, which I think is fascinating. Which it links me to Doncaster in one way or another. Now, Mike, regarding Regan, you disappeared. Now, for whatever reason, Mike, I mean, especially in the paranormal world, I mean, authors, live streamers, for example, attract a lot of criticism. I mean, be it jealousy, we don't know. Maybe it's people just bored of one of the cause of ruckus. We just don't know. I mean, how do you handle criticism, especially if it's aimed towards your own work?
Oh my God, yeah. I've had death threats. I've had people threaten to burn my house down and kill my kids and kidnap my kids and all sorts. I've had to get the police involved and report stuff to the police. Most people are lovely. The vast majority are lovely, but there does tend to be a few that are not as nice. And you know, I've had people steal my work and all sorts. So you just kind of, at the minute, it's like water off a duck's back. I'm so used to it now. I'm so used to people being a bit nasty that I just kind of crack on with it. And like I say,
it's a shame you have to go through it, though, isn't it? I mean, no one should have to go through it.
Yeah.
No.
For me, it's like fuel. It's like fuel to the fire, you know.
Yeah. Jessica Bailey Smith wants to know, have you got any projects, any more books coming out, and what's your next project?
So I've published 30. I've got another 20 that are already finished and they're sat with the publisher. They include a book on 39 Grey Street with the actual real history. I've also got a book on the urban legends of Hull. I've got a book on the Walls Triangle. We've done a few trips out into the Walls Triangle and visited various places. I've got a series of books coming out on Hull during the Second World War. They're all finished. And they include books on the evacuation, books on air raid shelters, and stuff like that. So, yeah, there's quite a lot on the way. There's 2 more UFO books on the way as well. There's a follow-up to the UFO files, and there's also one about the North Yorkshire UFO files as well. So, yeah, there's a lot on the way, and they're all finished.
That's brilliant. I've released my first publication last year, Restless Realm, which in a way I'm quite thankful. I'm thankful for the first lockdown because it did give me the ability to actually pen it and write it up and release it. Now, but for someone such as yourself who's wrote a plethora of publications, how do you find the time?
It's all about juggling. It's all about juggling. Like today, for example, I went upstairs and I thought I'm going to have a nice relaxing afternoon. I put a movie on and I'll just sit with the laptop on my knee and just write while I'm watching a film. I'm quite blessed that I can write and still have a conversation, or I can watch a film, or it doesn't detract me from what I'm doing. So I tend to, I was writing literally 5 minutes before we started the broadcast tonight. I was just I was editing some stuff and typing some stuff up. And then I'll probably, after this, I'll probably do a bit more. But yeah, so I just love writing. I just, when I start, I get into that groove and I just carry on.
I must admit, I'm a bit safe. I'm a bit mistaken. I wrote as I mentioned, I wrote my first book, and it did for me because I was dreading my first lockdown because I'm an outdoor creature, and but it got me in a mindset. I thought I could escape in my mind. Because my body's locked up doesn't mean my mind has to be. And it does. My partner Beth, she's a writer. She released 4 novels. Would you say it's harder to be a non-fiction writer than a fiction writer?
In the past, I've written fiction. Like I say, when I was at school, I wrote a series of love stories, and it was because of them I was able to pass my English GCSE. That the teachers loved them so much. And I do enjoy writing fiction, but the thing is with non-fiction, what I enjoy is I'm a bit of a nerd, so it's stuff like I love reading the old books. I love reading the authors that have come before me. I love to read viewpoints and what they've said about the building and things like that. So it's all, for me, it's all about the referencing and then, I wish I could show you my Yorkshire ghost books, which are all in this corner of the office. There's literally hundreds, and they're all stacked up.
I've got an office like that.
Yeah, and it's great. I love reading through them on a night. I'll always have a book in my backpack. And I tend to read loads and loads and loads. And I like going through the old books and referencing, and so I do like non-fiction. But I'd love one day to return back to fiction. I've always got ideas and stuff like that.
What I'd like to know, Mike, regarding this love poems you used to write, were these inspired by a particular person? Were they were they aimed at somebody?
Nothing like that. I'd basically, when I was at school, my teacher, our GCSE English teacher, she'd basically said, I want you to write a love story, and it's to give you kind of a framework, and it had to be based around 2 people that met and rushed into a relationship on their first date.
Right.
As a teenage boy, I'm like, I don't really want to write about crap like that, And I remember going home and I remember putting music on and sitting there with a pen and a pad, and I just got into the zone and wrote this love story, and it kind of ended on a cliffhanger. It was a bit of a tearjerker, and I handed it in and thought, that's it, she's going to mark me down, and that I'll move on to something else. And at the end of the week, she kind of stood in front of the class and said, I'm going to read out the best story that we've had this week. And at the time, she was heavily pregnant, so she was really hormonal. And she started reading my story, but she was crying all the way through. And as a teenager, I thought, crap, what have I done? Like, I've really upset this poor lady. I've traumatized her. And when she got to the end, she said, can you stay back after the lesson? And I thought I was in trouble.
Detention.
And everybody went. And she said, with this piece of writing alone, you can get a C in your English language. And I thought, fantastic, I'll just settle for that. So, and she said, I want you to write another one, but this time I don't want to give you any framework, just go and write write a love story about two people. And what I did was I put a supernatural element and I based it on a girl who had a mirror. And every time she looked into the mirror, she could see into the past. And she was kind of pulled into this world on the other side of the mirror. And at the end, she had to go back to her time. And it was quite a nice little story. And again, they absolutely loved it. The English department absolutely loved it. And it was... And sadly, I've not got hold of them now. The English department of the school's no longer there. It's been flattened. That's how old I am. So I don't even know where that work is now. But yeah, it was great.
I mean, it does. I mean, coming from from Hull, I meant like myself in Featherstone. What do your mates think about it? You should be playing rugby instead of writing soppy poems.
Yeah, well, that was it. I mean, I went to school with Lee Radford, who for a long time was the OLFC coach. So when we played rugby at school, we'd get thrown the ball. We'd just throw it to Lee and just let Lee go do his stuff. And so we were all expected, even from primary school. I was in the primary school rugby team. We were all expected to play rugby. And stuff like that. And I used to hit the gym 3 times a week, so we was all expected to do that. But for me, writing was kind of an escape. It was kind of a to get away from all that.
I agree totally, because I mean I come from a mining town myself, Featherstone. That's Featherstone Rovers Rugby League, and but I don't really show. I mean, as in the latter years, I don't show any interest in sport. I am I'd rather use my old grey matter, and because I mean, what's left of it anyhow. Now, out of your publications, Mike, I mean, what would you say has been the most difficult to write, a bit emotional or difficult if finding evidence? I mean, is there one in particular what stands out?
So many years ago, I wrote a book about a little boy called William Papa. William Papa was a 14-year-old fisher lad that sailed from Hull, and over the Christmas of 1881, he was beaten up every day while he was at sea. They used to starve him. And they used to just treat him like rubbish, really. And he ended up dying, and they threw him overboard. And there was subsequently all the truth came out. There was then a massive trial. And I wanted to write a book about him because there was no really full-length books ever written about this little boy. And I remember sitting in the archives researching it, and I was coming out the archives just, absolutely broken because there was I mean, I was reading autopsy reports and inquest reports, and that I remember typing that up. And when I typed that up, I would sit there for 10 hours a day typing, and at the end of it, I would turn everything off and I'd just go for a walk. I'd head outside. So during lockdown, that's been more difficult. So I've kind of been doing the work I've been doing. I finished writing a book on World War II, which was quite difficult to write because of the subject matter. But you get emotionally involved, you get attached to these people in your books and stuff. So it's nice just to get a bit of fresh air, and I'm really lucky that my family, I'm really blessed with a really good supportive family. I've got a really close friend network. I've just seen Mike Daring comment on there, and Mike is a really good friend of mine. We've been on loads of adventures together. I'm really blessed with a tight-knit group of people that really support my work. I am open in the future, Mike, to release some fiction. One of the projects I worked on when I was at school was called The Beast. And it was about the Beast of Bodmin Moor, and it was about a group of city folk that go to Bodmin Moor on a holiday, and they come across the Beast of Bodmin Moor. And it was sort of, I'm still here. It was sort of an action adventure love story. And I wrote that as it was all handwritten, and I took that into school and I handed that over to one of my teachers, and they read it, and it got passed around from pupil to pupil to pupil, and everyone kept saying you need to do a follow-up because I kind of left it on a cliffhanger. Do they or don't they get together, and do they find the beast, and I ended up writing 3 volumes to that. And they're all in a big folder, a big thick folder. They're all still handwritten, and the idea was to start typing it up. So I started typing it up about 2 years ago, but then I get sidetracked by all the non-fiction stuff. So I kind of, it's nice to go to it every now and again and just write a little bit. But I mean, the problem is now my name is associated with non-fiction, so I would probably have to write under a pseudonym or a pen name or something like that, so people don't get too confused.
Hey, Stephen King can do it. Why not?
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, it's just I mean, at some point in the future, I would like to release them, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, what is it about a subject that motivates you to write about it in the first place?
Well, I mean, stuff like 39 Degree Street, I was just really angry that the real history had been ignored, and the real people and the real events had been swept aside for a fictional history. And people were believing this fictional history. So that is one of the reasons why I wanted to write about Degree Street. But it's the same in a lot of things. I wrote a book about a guy called Robert Dunstan Stevenson. He was a suspect in the Jack the Ripper case. All the stuff beforehand about him was all based on his own writings, and he was a fantasist. So people believed his words rather than looking at the historical primary sources. And the same with Frederick Bailey Demon. There was a lot of stuff written about Demon that just wasn't true. It wasn't accurate. So a lot of it is just kind of setting that record straight and putting those historical documents together to form a linear story that show people this is the truth. This is what really happened. But for some reason, this is what people believe. And what I like to do with the paranormal stuff, I like to give people the stories, but give them the history and let them make their own minds up. So if you read the books, you will see it's kind of split into two. You've got the real history there, but you've also got kind of the stories that are part of that property as well. And that's what I like to do with that. So then they've got both sides, like you were discussing earlier. They've got both sides of the story. I'm not kind of forcing it down there. I'm not forcing my opinions down their neck. They're just getting to read all the historical sources and making up their own mind at the end of the day.
I don't want to spook you, Matt, but I've just seen someone in your background.
Oh, that'll be my daughter.
A black shadow.
Yeah, she's just made us a cup of tea. So she's just very calm.
Can you see me to win?
No, can't see it.
Hey, that would have been a first. That would have been a first. Live on air, ghost live on air.
She just brought us a cup of tea. So
that's nice. Now, are there any subjects, Mike, you wouldn't cover regarding writing? And if so, what subjects would you not consider?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe not like nice, fluffy, things like nice stuff, nice, nice stories, feel good stories. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff I do is all kind of dark history, so I tend not to write too much about the nicer stuff. I mean, I suppose it would be nice to write about kind of nice things, but would that sell as well as
I agree, but then again, people like the darker side and the macabre side of things, don't they?
Oh yeah, they love it. Yeah, definitely. So there is always like a Piccadilly Circus at the minute. But yeah, so it would be nice to write a book about something nice, some nice, lovely, uplifting subject matter. But I quite like the darker side as well. I
think we all do, don't we? We've all got a dark side, I believe. Yeah, I mean, it would be lying if we say we didn't. I mean, we all have dark thoughts now and again, don't we? Thinking, I wish you'd bloody drop dead, wouldn't you? Yeah, we all think that sometimes. Now, slight off chance of changing direction for 1 minute. Now, behind me, my show is now going to feature what I like to call a backdrop visit. Now, behind me, it is not my living room. Every episode of my show, I'm going to be featuring a backdrop location. Now, I can't physically go there in person right now because of lockdown, but these are places I've visited in the past. And behind me is no different. Now, behind me is people probably not recognise as a Black Swan in York, Peace-on Green, in a brilliant 15th century coaching house, reputed to be haunted by a plethora of ghosts and characters. Now, we remember I spent time there. I did have an experience, if you'd like to hear it. I mean, I don't know if you would or not, but I mean, it's...
Go ahead.
Yes. Now, behind me right now is a stairwell going to upstairs. Now, these stairs are a bit on the wonky. If you've never been, these stairs are very wonky. So if you've not had a drink, it feels, by the time you get to the top, it feels like you've had a drink. Now, this particular instance, we stayed in the Turpin Suite, and now there is a cat that wanders around, but there's also a spirit of a ghost cat who likes to sit on the beds, which we didn't experience that. But what I did experience was in the bar. Now, I've been given a key for a back door. Now, unfortunately, because I like to have a wander around York at 2 o'clock in the morning to take photographs, but this time I couldn't because the key didn't fit the lock, and I didn't fancy climbing in someone's bedroom window at 2 o'clock in the morning, scaring the crap out of them. So I thought, I'll stay downstairs in the bar. Now, this particular bar, there's a lovely old fireplace, clay pipes on the side. There's also like a tricycle, a rocking horse, and no word of a lie, I was sat there, door shut, and I had footsteps on the concrete floor near the window. The first thing I did, I went to the window, thought, is there anyone outside? No. I went back to my corner, sat down again, and these footsteps I heard again, distinctively on the inside of the window. Now, there is rumours there is a passageway leading to St. Cuthbert's Church across the road, but no one's ever found it, so don't know if there's any credibility behind that. But, I mean, from my experience, I mean, there is a rumour there's a lady in there. She was believed to be a jilted bride, and apparently people who see her don't feel remorse or anything. She seems quite pitiful in a way, but she's not an evil entity or anything. She just wanders around. There's also a little boy there as well. I believe they're named Jack. But I'd say this place. I think this place is more credible than other mentioned. I won't mention the name of your pub, which should be covered by certain TV programs. But I think this place, the Black Swan, is more credible. I mean, I don't know if you've experienced this place, Mike.
Yeah, we went to York not that long ago for a project on North Yorkshire. So we visited. We spent a couple of days and we visited the North York Moors, the Yorkshire Dales, York, Whitby, Scarborough, and just visited all the kind of places in North Yorkshire that have stories of ghosts, bagwests, boggles, nature spirits, all this kind of thing. And we just went on kind of it was like a road trip over 3 or 4 days, and there was 3 of us, and we visited a few of the pubs, and yeah, it was nice. It was lovely. And then just researching them all now, looking at the history of them. So Black Swan is in there, and the other pubs as well.
That's and you always got to sample the local brew as well, haven't you? I mean, it's a must.
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny because the day we went, it was really weird because some places were open and some places were closed. So it was kind of luck of the draw, really, where we got to go into and where we couldn't go into. But the people I was with, the kind of people that knock on doors and stuff, and ask if there's anyone there, and can we have a quick look around and can we get photos and stuff like that. So we did get into some interesting places.
I mean, Nikki Scotland's mentioned she slept over a Black Swan and slippers and mobile phone moved during the night. I mean, we slept in a Turpin suite. I mean, I don't know if that's that room itself. It's got quite a feel to it as well. But I mean, from the other 2 suites we had in, I can't really comment on those 2. But I believe the Turpin suite was supposed to be relevant to our activity, mainly from a cat. Now, Jacqueline Dixon wants to know, what advice could you give to a first-time author?
Write about what you love, and then you'll never get bored of it. So, I mean, if you're really into ghosts and the paranormal, make that your thing. If you're really into UFOs or angels or fairies or crystals or whatever, just write about the kind of things that you love, and it'll just flow so much more naturally.
Yeah.
And you'll just enjoy doing it as well. There's no point writing a book that you're going to hate by the time you've finished it. You've got to write about stuff that you feel passionate about. Yeah. So definitely write about the stuff you love.
I mean, that's brilliant advice. Is that? I mean, I should have asked you this a year ago. But then again, people said to me, I mean, I've got a plethora of books in my office as well. I mean, got bookshelf after bookshelf of all different books, like UFOs, ghosts. I mean, got black arts and stuff like that. So, because understand on one side, you've got to understand the other side as well to get a true recollection of evidence. If we want to put it that way. But I mean, we've all got a few bits and bobs. I mean, I would encourage or motivate us to actually put pen to paper. Myself, I've got my old typewriter, 1951 typewriter, and that in a way did encourage me to write my first book. I mean, for you, Mike, what physical bits and bobs do you have to aid in your activity with writing?
I mean, God, it's really funny. I have a backpack that I take everywhere with me, and it's got my tablet in. It's got I have a black blue book, and this is like kind of it's not a diary as such, but it's got all things like the names of people at archives and contacts, and it has a list of all the books I've written and the word count and the page count all in a table. stuff like that. It's got stuff like, so for example, there's a book I'm working on at the minute where I'm going to have to visit Doncaster at some point. I'm going to have to visit the archives in Doncaster. So there's a list of stuff that I want to have a look at when I go there. That's all in my little blue book.
I'll tell you what, when
it's
you
the
come,
same
give
for
me
places in
a call, I'll take you
Scarborough, in
around.
York, in the East Riding Archives. So every page will have a location that I want to visit at some point and what I want. And that's kind of my, I mean, I look at that every day and think, right, this is what I'm going to need today. That's kind of my tool that I use. And it's got all sorts in it. It's got notes and plans and up and coming projects and things that I'm working on. And yeah, it's full of all sorts, really.
Brilliant. I mean, when you do visit Doncaster, give me a call. I'll take you around a few places.
Yeah, will.
Now, Mike, there's a saying, there's a book in each one of us. I mean, from your experience, Mike, is this true? Are we all capable of writing a book? I mean, what you just mentioned previously, write about what you love, but can we actually really, each and every one of us, write a book?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe that anyone can. It goes on what you. So a friend of mine recently, she just published her first book, and it's a book about poetry. That's her thing. She's doing really well with that. I had a friend of mine visit me, and he sort of said, "I'd love to do it, but I don't know what to write about." And we got chatting about things that he liked, and it turns out he likes sort of the history of Clubland and stuff like that. So I said, "Why don't you write about your experiences in Clubland and what you did in Clubland and your role and stuff?" So he's gone away to work on that. And I get a lot of people contact me with ideas that they want to expand on, and a lot of them just want nudging in the right direction, or they'll come to me and say, "Where can we find out about this? You know what?" And and a lot of the times it'll be a point of visit archives or talking to certain people and just other authors. Really, and next to me, I've got a stack of books where people have come to me for advice, and I've given them advice, and then they've sent me copies, or they've mentioned me in the acknowledgements and stuff. So I've got quite a stack of books piling up next to me, and it's nice to help other people.
Yeah, I agree there. Now, I mean, this day and age, Mike, I mean, with such an array of information available to us at the touch of a button, I mean, there's thousands and thousands of publications out there to hand. I mean, all regarding the likes of Amazon, for example. But regarding books, is self-publication the best way to go forward as a first-time novelist?
That's how I started. I self-published through Amazon. I created 4 books on there and put them out to market. I then got a call from an organisation that wanted to purchase the rights to one of those books and asked me if I was working on anything else that would be of interest. So I sent them some manuscripts and they optioned the rights to 4 of those. And then off the back of that, I got a publisher. So I kind of did it backwards. But yeah, I would urge anyone that is interested to go forward and try it. And the great thing now about these websites where you can create your own books is that you have creative control. So you can design the cover, you can design the layout, the contents, the photographs that go into it, all that kind of stuff. It's all yours really to do with what you want. And there's a lot of success stories out there. Yeah.
I mean, how should an author strive to make sure their publication stands out from similar subjects on the market, such as what they wrote about? I mean, say if I wrote a book on, for example, ghosts, what would I have to do to make mine stand out from somebody else who's wrote on the same subject?
I think at the minute, one of the big things about the paranormal is the lack of historical sources in paranormal books. So, for example, I'm researching a property, and I was looking at the ghost stories attached to this property, and every book that I've read on this property, I mean, there must be about 150 books that have featured this property. They all regurgitate the same story over and over again. And as a historian, I came to this story and thought, this is a historical fact. There must be historical sources to back up these claims. And I went into the archives and looked for the historical evidence. And these historical evidence didn't support it. A story that had never been told. And I found that one time again, we found it, especially with paranormal groups, when they're visiting locations, they'll regurgitate the same history over and over again.
Yeah.
They'll forget about the historical sources. So you'll often find the same names creeping into these stories, and there's no sort of history to back them up. But when you look at it, gives you different people, different locations, different dates. So in some cases I've found where it's supported the story, cases where it's debunked the story. And I think more and more people are doing that now. More
We just froze a little bit there. Don't forget hear me, not Mike. We have a technical issue at the moment. It seems to have. We've just lost Mike at the moment. Bear with me. He's there.
yeah.
Blame the aliens. Now, well, great question I'm going to ask you next, Mike. I mean, as an author, is it healthy to work to a deadline? I mean, should you give yourself a time limit? I mean, plus as well, just put yourself at such a pace actually affect your quality of work.
I've never set a deadline, never, because I work for. I do a lot of freelance work with like the Hull Daily Mail and people like that. They'll often contact me and say, "Can you write an article by this date?" So they often set deadlines for that sort of stuff. But I'm quite relaxed with it all. I mean, you know, ask Paul Stevenson and the guys at Haunted Magazine what I'm like. And sometimes as well, I'll send articles to them and forget that I've sent articles to them. So the new magazine will come out and they'll tag me in it, and I'll say, I don't remember writing for you. And they'll say, you wrote this. All right, yeah, I remember now. So I send that many away. I mean, there's 4 or 5 magazines that I write for, a couple of different newspapers. So on average, every month I'll be sending new content out to different people, and I tend to forget who's got it. You know, I think this month I've sent 4 articles over to the Old Daily Mail. One's been published, so they're sitting on the other 3. So there is stuff going out all over the place. And then what I do with them at the end of the year, I put them into a book. So it's like a collective works of the past year. And on average, they'll have like 200, maybe 300 articles in. So, and they cover all aspects from ghosts and hauntings to UFOs to dark history and murder and all sorts.
That's perfect. Now, a little bit more serious now. I mean, something as an author, we all know too well happens. I mean, forgive me if I pronounce this wrong, but plagiarism. I mean, to present someone else's work as your own without their consent. Now, Mike, we know this happens. I mean, especially in the world of self-publishing. I mean, but what can an author do to protect their work? And is the law on their side?
Yeah, I mean, over the years, I've had stuff from the articles I've written for the newspapers. People have used them without permission. Recently, I found a YouTube video that was essentially they just read out my article over the top of some footage. And when I approached them and said, "This is my work," they said, "Oh, well, we got it off the internet." That was their kind of response. What I tend to do with my stuff is I tend to kind of put things in there that are quite unique. That are sort of unique to my writing style. So when people read it, they'll know that, you know, it's come from me. But yeah, I mean, it's awful at the moment, especially in the paranormal world. There seem to be a lot of books popping up where people's work's been taken from them, and you know, it's really sad.
Yeah. I mean, do you think this wouldn't be a problem if we had people went to publishing houses, for example, like Ladybird or Penguin and stuff like that? Do you think they'd actually stamp this out, or do you think because we have such likes of self-publication, people find it an easier way to make money?
I think it's the latter. I think because of self-publication, people can take your work and publish it. I know in the past, when I was self-publishing, Amazon would take 24 hours to make sure that you hadn't plagiarized anyone's work, and they would go through your text and make sure you hadn't got your text from anywhere and stuff like that, which was great. But then, you know, you'd you'd find nowadays that I know there's been in the last sort of, well, since lockdown, it's happened with Richard Eastep.
Yes,
He's
yeah.
had a lot of books which have been taken and reproduced, and they put different covers on and different pen names. And I think it's quite bad that that's going on, and hopefully Amazon will crack down on it and stop it.
But I say it does seem, like I say, it does seem people we actually know themselves. Obviously, I've seen things on posts and things, and I've never actually purchased it. But I mean, I would never purchase a book I know was copied off somebody else's work. I mean, like my book, I know my book is unique to myself. There's some history in there I researched and I know about, because I wanted to go down and live, like I said, a path that's slightly different to somebody else's. And there's nothing worse than finding research offline, for example, and finding it fake or false, and then somebody else follows your work, and before you know it, you've got a snowball, and the truth's totally lost in all abbreviation.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I've seen that. I've written stuff for organisations where they've sort of said to me, weave in real history with fictional history in order to promote a big event. So for the City of Culture Year, for example, I work with a group called the Land of Green Ginger Fellowship. One of the stories, and I'm not going to say which one it is, but one of the stories was fictional, and it was created for a event. When the event happened, it was fantastic, and nobody really talked about this story. But very recently, someone published a work, and they featured that story in it as a real event. So we know where it's come from.
Yeah.
We know it's fictional. So that was quite amusing to read, to see that they'd done that. But yeah, it was funny because we've caught them out. So
I mean, there's something I always say, because I've always had a little joke with Beth. I mean, if I'd not done a paranormal, I mean, I do love the history, I love the archaeology and stuff like that. And I thought if it weren't for a paranormal, I'd probably go into the archaeological side of things and investigate things from the latter years. But I've always said, I mean, I've always fancied being an history teacher. And I always said to Beth, what I'd do, I'd be a little bit different I'd be unconventional, be like to other teachers. What I'd do, I'd give them a made up version of history and tell them to go out and find it, the true history of it version, and then come back to it and mark it from that. And I think for me, it's different because it gets some interest. Rather than copying somebody else's work, I mean, for example, World War One, World War Two scenario. I mean, give somebody a small, Passchendaele, for example, write about Passchendaele, a particular incident within war era, and slightly alter it a little bit, but only in a way and then tell the students to go out and find, is that what I wrote true, or is it false? If it is false, can you clarify it? And I think in a way, paranormal's like that as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Now, we haven't got a lot of time left, Mike, but I was trying to squeeze a few extra minutes, if that's all right. Now, we all mentioned previously, this moment in time, there's an abundance of publications out there. I mean, for us, I mean, there's ghosts and spirits. The amount of publication out there is brilliant at the moment. You can't fault it. But for you, Mike, what makes a writer?
Someone that's driven, motivated, and someone that enjoys what they're doing. And someone that is not afraid to break them boundaries and go and do that research and put it out there for people to read. So yeah, think little things like that.
Yeah. And do you find as well, I mean, the ones where money is a factor, you believe that because of that factor, the quality suffers?
Definitely. Most definitely.
I mean, books. I mean, we all love them. I mean, but I am not alone, and you like books. I mean, I know a plethora of people that love literature now, but I mean, go back 20 years, you could not go into an office without a wall full of books. I mean, there were no computers as like we have these days with worldwide internet. I mean, all you saw were books and books, and that was the internet of the day. I mean, which I think is brilliant. I mean, to actually physically pick up a book and find some pages and read it. Now, jump a few years later to today. I mean, we've got social media, we've got live streaming platforms, and we've got terrestrial TV and physical paperbacks. But because of online streaming, our terrestrial TV programs and physical paperback books in a fear of dying out because of social media and such as ebooks, where people can just download them.
I don't know. I mean, a lot of the people I talk to still sort of say we like the old book. We like the feel of it in our hands, and it's amazing how many people I say to people you can download it on Kindle. Well, I would rather wait and buy it on, buy the paperback, and that way they say, we'll bring it along to a tour, you can sign it and stuff like that.
Yeah,
People bring them to lectures. So yeah, I think I'd like to hope there's still a demand and still a market for the old fashioned, and it's just the smell as well. I mean, you'll know yourself when you get sort of Haunted magazine delivered, and it's fresh off the press. It's got that wonderful smell to it. And on the flip side of that, you know yourself when you go in the archive and you open up those documents and those old books that have been there for years and years, they've got that very unique smell. And it just brings back so many memories. It brings back memories of going into these places and doing that research.
There is a book I have got, if you can find it at the moment. Give me 2 seconds. I've got a book here. And it is, now this book started it all for me. I mean, I had this book as a child, and I got that copy went, but I found a latter version, a smaller down version, and this Arthur C. Clarke's World of Strange Powers.
Oh yeah, I've got a copy of that.
Yeah, that for me started it all off, and it's like I said, there's a smell about it. There's a quality about it. You cannot get on a computer or a Kindle. I mean, I've got dozens of books like this kind of age, and for me, that started off. Is there a book what started off for you? I mean, who do you follow regarding writings?
I absolutely love the stuff that Richard Jones has done. You might remember him from years ago on the Most Haunted live shows.
Yeah.
Richard Jones has a tour company in London, but he wrote a book called I've got it somewhere, but he wrote a book about ghosts in Britain, and it was basically like a road trip, and it was a really popular book. And he wrote one about London, walking haunted London, which was really good because that kind of got me into the idea of being a tour guide here in Hull. And he's written some amazing books. He's done stuff on Jack the Ripper. And then when I was just starting out, he came to me and asked me to write a chapter in one of his books, which was such an honour to be able to do that. And that was in one of his Haunted Britain books. I wrote a chapter about Hull. And I think he's the author that I've followed for quite some years now. But I've got all sorts in my collection. I've got M.R. James for all his fictional stuff. W.T. Stead wrote a lot of ghost stories back in the day. There's so many authors that have produced so many wonderful books over the years.
Do you see any? I mean, these are authors. From like but I won't say yesteryear as such. We were more from an era where they went out and researched and found credible evidence by their own work. Now, are we a case of we're going to actually see less and less of that, where people start copying rather than going out seeing fresh research out there? Or are we going to see a case of like that music, they recopy what people's work? Or do you think new stuff will come out? And if so, do you think it'll be anything groundbreaking?
I hope new stuff will come out. I hope people will go and investigate and find stories themselves. And I think I do it multiple ways. You either go to the location and spend some time in the location, or I go to the archives and look through the old documents from centuries ago that people have never looked at and have left there for years and years and years. And I uncover a lot of stories that way. And then I crisscross the stuff on the investigation I'll look at in the archives. The stuff I found in the archives I'll go and maybe investigate. So I hope people can still continue to do that and find new stories and new locations. And certainly.
I agree there, because I like you mentioned the archives. I mean, Doncaster itself, I've got the archives. I'm a member of. I've got my membership card, and I think, physically looking at deeds and things from yesteryear. In the plans, mapping, even similar like boundary rules and laws and things. Stuff like that. Libraries. Libraries these days are a few and far between. But like yourself, people who love books love libraries. It's something. A researcher must always never be without, if you agree.
Oh yeah, totally agree. And the great stuff about that is while you're in there, I tend to go off on a tangent. So I'll think maybe, I'm looking at this, but while I'm looking at the shelves, I see something else that catches my eye, and so I'll often walk out with a bag full of books.
I'll tell you what I found as well, Mike. I don't know about your local libraries, but one in Doncaster, they do have a little section where they sell old books off as well.
Oh yeah, I've got a few over the years, a few out of print books and a couple of rarities and stuff like that. The Hull History Centre, there's always stuff being sold. Back when it was before COVID and stuff like that, there was a lot of sales going on in there, and they were selling off a lot of the old documents, and and people send stuff to me as well. People bring stuff to me and hand down their old books and stuff on the subject because they know I love reading them.
Yeah. Now we've got I'll say I'm running over time a little bit, but quickly, I have now a what if section. Now this segment is based upon the possibility of an action going either left or right, and it's purely for entertainment purpose only. Now, Mike, what if in your what if is if intelligent aliens contacted you and insisted you had to choose a member of the human race to represent humankind as a whole, who would you choose and why?
David Attenborough. Because he's just such a lovely guy. I love watching his TV shows. They're just so relaxing, and I love his passion for wildlife and the natural world. Yeah, certainly someone like Attenborough.
Well, I was going to see where you're going from there. Yeah, that's. I wasn't expecting such a quick answer, actually. No, but finally, though, I mean, got anything up and coming? Any new projects, any TV programs you're appearing in soon? Any you'd like to plug away?
At the minute, I'm working on a couple of new books. As I mentioned earlier, one of those is linked to Doncaster. It's about a guy called James Gray. He was known as the Beverley Road Bum Stabber. He stabbed 5 women in Beverley, stabbed 5 women in Doncaster. So I'm hoping to get through to Doncaster at some point to go through the archives and find out a little bit more about his backstory while he was in Doncaster. I've been offered some TV stuff. I've not said anything yet. I'm still debating it. But yeah, there's all sorts. I'm starting a new project this month where Hull University have employed me to sit in a forest and tell ghost stories. So that should be fun. So I'm looking forward to that, and that's over the next month or so.
That's brilliant, is that? Now, finally, Mike, I mean, we know social media, we've got books, we've got magazines, but in your opinion, what is the most credible way to investigate the paranormal? Are we talking as an investigator, as a writer, or an author, or maybe just talking about it like we're doing now? I mean, would you say writing is the best way forward regards to investigating?
I like the research side. I love going in the archives and researching all these old stories about haunted houses and stuff like that. And I love looking at kind of the old trade directories to see who lived in there, and the old newspaper reports, see what was going on at the address. So I love the research aspect. As much as I love the investigation aspect, I often found that when I'm investigating, it's freezing cold. You're out in the middle of the night. It's often pouring down with rain. Whereas if you're in the archives, it's temperature controlled, and it's a lot more pleasant.
Yeah, I agree totally. I mean, when we do get back to some normality regarding ghost hunting, do you think we're going to see new locations popping up and the demise of obviously some others?
Yeah, I reckon so. Yeah, I think during lockdown, I think people. I mean, I've had a lot of reports from people saying they've had stuff going on at their properties, and these places have never reported anything before. But I think because of lockdown, more people are there. You know, and they're kind of a captive audience, so they're going to see more stuff. So I think we might see some more, and it's a shame that we're losing so many as well. I mean, you know, we've seen a lot of locations closing the doors, so hopefully on the flip side we'll see more open.
Do you think because of lockdown, these spirits are thinking, I wish you'd bugger off somewhere else?
Maybe, yeah. Maybe they're just getting snare crazy as well by being locked inside with us all this time.
Possible. I mean, imagine being stuck into. I mean, I can't imagine it because I mean, you imagine. I put myself in there. I did a poem a few years back, and I released it, and it's in my book as well. And I always thought to myself, I'd try and put myself in from a spirit's point of view and look at it from their angle. And I think what people need to do is investigate that way as well. Become what you're searching for in a way. Look at the respect and how they'd expect, because these were people from an era would add respect and discipline drilled into them. I mean, we're going to come to an era today where everybody shouts and swears at them, and they're not going to respond to that. I mean, if anything, you can respond more with honey than you are with vinegar.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I always said was if you go into a building and there's a spirit in there that's been in there for 150 years, and you ask out for something and they knock in response and you scream or you run off, you've lost that opportunity to communicate. Whereas if you stay, you know, you might open up a new line of communication and get some answers.
I mean, how many times you've seen on TV program, for example, they've responded to a knock and they leg it. I mean, the whole point of investigating it is staying there and facing it and searching what you've asked for it. You've got what you needed. Why run off?
Yeah, I remember a few years ago there was a lady came on an event and she started off by saying she didn't believe in any of it. She thought it was all rubbish. By about 10 minutes later, she was screaming. She was terrified. She'd seen a shadow in a room and it freaked her out. And she wanted a taxi home. And I went back. I took her back to the room and said, "Stand in the room and don't move, and we'll look for this together." And sure enough, 2 shadows appeared. And all it was every time a vehicle was passing the building, the lights were shining through the window, and she'd seen her own shadow moving along the wall. And I explained to her, I said, if you'd have run then, you would have believed that was paranormal, and you would have never come back. I said, but because you've stayed and you've waited it out, you can explain that now. And at the end of the night, she couldn't thank me enough. You know, she said she really enjoyed the evening, and it really opened her eyes up as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. But you need to look at normal before you look at the paranormal. I had this experience a few years back because I love the old school stuff, and I've got this little compass, and I remember placing it down once, and this compass was spinning a little while, and it had a lovely loom on it, so it glue up, so you could see it spinning. And we go, oh, there's panicking! No, we've got something. No, I'm getting out of here. No, you think about where your location is. I mean, look, we're side of a main road here. There's vehicles going back once every 20 minutes or so. I mean, you're going to get reverberation from vehicles passing. Oh, yeah, you are, aren't you? I mean, a lot of people don't look at it that way. I mean, look at it rationally first. I mean, by all means, investigate it, but look for a normal before you look for a paranormal first. I mean, people forget that, don't they?
Totally agree with that.
Anyhow, Mike, we've come to the end of it. I mean, I would like to thank you for being my guest on my second show. I mean, please feel free to put some names forward as future guests if you want to come back on again at some point. I mean, but I'd like to thank you for being my second guest, Mr. Mike Covell, everybody. Good night, folks.
Thanks. Thank you.